Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, so today I'm going to talk about, well, I guess the title of the talk is Dungeons and Dragons and Badges. Yeah. So I assume there were like double the number of people there for this morning session, and everyone's like, well, I'll go to lunch early. I'm Lucas Blair. I'm a game and systems designer. My company's Little Bird Games. We work mostly in education. We do some healthcare stuff, so mainly therapeutic games. And I also work in ed tech, so we have a platform called Mod Course that we use as well. So yeah. Oh, and also this is relevant only for today's talk. I'm a level 16 Hill Dwarf Tempest cleric. And a follower of the Wave Mother Umberlee. That will make sense in like 2 slides or 3 slides from now. But so that is my D&D character. So I'm going to start by I want to have like a simplified discussion about how we do badging now. And I should have said earlier I've been working on badging since essentially Mozilla decided that was a good idea 5 or 6 years ago, right? So I have built multiple badging platforms from the ground up, done lots of the curriculum design and curriculum development that goes along with that. And my dissertation was actually on building achievement systems. So I have, I have a reasonable amount of qualification, at least to have an opinion on this stuff. So, the kind of the simplified explanation, or at least how I think of badges now, or how we do them now, is that it's a combination of a couple things. It could be a one-to-one, so essentially you do a thing and you get a badge. In some cases, it's a one for many, so that can be doing multiple things, or in some cases earning multiple badges, and then you get a badge for it. Those are called meta badges, right? So it's a badge for getting badges. And then in other cases, the badges will actually build on one another, so they become more difficult over time. So it's like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. And those are incremental badges, right? And so that is, for the most part, how we've done them. And so what I try to think about, a couple different things. So what do those badges represent? And for the most part, most of the badges that we make or that we have made, they represent an event or an artifact, and they will imply some kind of state of being or some kind of competency in the earner, right? So if this person has this badge, they must have done this thing. That means they must be good at this, right? And if you get somebody that's got lots of badges, then you can look at those badges and you can make some assumptions about that person, about what they're good at, what they're bad at, what they're interested in, right? And one of the issues, or some of the issues that we run into, and one of a couple questions that I ask myself, is that is everything badge worthy, and when are there too many? Because in a lot of systems, you end up having lots of badges, right? You have lots of stuff for people to do. So over time, you're going to have lots of badges, and then so the more badges you have, there's like inflation, right? And at a certain point, there could be too many, and then if everything is a badge, or if all the things are badges, then what is a badge worth? And like I said, they start to decrease in value kind of over time. So this is something that has always kind of concerned me about badges. So anyway, so that's kind of like just a simple snapshot, at least what's in my head about how some of the stuff that we're currently building and what I'm concerned about. So now we're going to take a total right turn and talk about something else for a moment, which is Dungeons and Dragons. You've all probably heard of it, I imagine. Has anybody ever actually played Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, there we go. I guess, yeah, on a campus, there's probably a disproportionate amount of people that have. So, and a lot of you have probably been exposed to it, maybe. So, shows like Stranger Things and stuff like that. Like they showed the kids playing D&D in the right. So anyway, so Dungeons and Dragons is something that I play, and anybody that's ever played any modern role-playing game, you've experienced those mechanics. But it's essentially a tabletop role-playing game, like 3 to 7 players led by a dungeon master. go do cool stuff. It is a mix of narrative, role-playing, and combat. And it's currently in its 5th edition. It's been around for decades now, I think since the 70s. And essentially the way that it works is that players build characters and act on their behalf, and they do so according to a set of rules. I have a stack of books beside me that are essentially the rule book, right? And it's like a combination of your imagination and your minis and like battle maps. And I will say that they're, when I play, there's like it's a mix of like young kids all the way up to like adults or something reasonably close to that. And to the right here is an example of a character sheet. You follow a set of rules and you build the character. You decide what you want them to be, what you decide you want them to be good at and bad at, and you plan it out. It's similar in a way to how a student might plan out the courses that they take at a university, right? This is a realization I came to at some point playing, because they've essentially said, this is the person that I want to be, and here are the steps that are going to get me there. And that's kind of what players do when you're planning a D&D character. And so, this character sheet is important, and we're gonna kind of dissect it in a bit. But here's here's what actual D&D. Here's just some cell phone pictures. So when I said like minis, I meant like little miniature figurines, and you're moving them around on a battle map, and you have your character sheet in front of you, and you're essentially acting out a movie or a story, right? And you do these in little play, a few hour play sessions at a time. So like here's different maps and stuff. So yeah. And I will say that, and I go back to this slide for a second. And I'll post an example of this later on, but there's really good examples. If anybody wants to see a group of people playing D&D, there's good examples of this online that I can show. And I will also add that, and this is a totally different talk, but if somebody is interested in teaching 21st century skills, most of you are probably aware of what like 21st century skills are. So like problem solving and creativity and working in multidisciplinary teams and all that stuff. It is my opinion that Dungeons and Dragons is the best way to do that. So that is a different talk, but yeah. So the breakdown of the character sheet, or part of the character sheet in D&D, and I'll say that the screenshot from before was a single page. The character sheets are oftentimes multiple pages. But the most important part to me, I think, especially for today, is at the top, there's a breakdown of what your character is good at and bad at. And you plan that, you decide it, and there's a certain amount of points you get, a certain amount of, you essentially put numerical values in these based on some limits, and you decide what your character is going to be. If they have lots of dexterity, but not a lot of strength, maybe they're a rogue. If they're super smart, they have high intelligence, but very low charisma, maybe they're a wizard, right? And this is all part of how D&D works. But the interesting thing about this, and as somebody that designs lots of educational things, I immediately had an appreciation for how they organize these things. Essentially, players plan out ability scores. And you say, overall, here are this is kind of my big picture, what I think I want this character to be good and bad at. There's a proficiency bonus that's applied, which is kind of like I should get better over time. And those abilities those abilities that you planned earlier, they directly tie into a bunch of skills. And if you see to the right here, I don't know if everybody should be able to see my cursor on the right, each of these skills, acrobatics, animal handling, arcana, athletics, deception, there's parentheses beside it, and they tie back to an ability. This is all done it's basic math, right? And as characters as they play more, as they experience more things, and as they level up, these numbers grow over time. These numbers grow over time, these numbers grow over time. And it gives you a really clear picture of what they're good at and bad at and what they like. And it's a very elegant system. It's very simple, but it's very well done. This is an old system. It is the foundation for, if anybody's played any modern role-playing game, any computer game, and a lot of the stuff that people talk about today, so the idea of experience points and levels and skill trees that are full of talents and skills. So here's 2 examples of those things from modern role-playing games. And role-playing mechanics are in lots of stuff now, apps, all kinds of things, where, you know, and D&D is really the foundation for a lot of that. So I think this is, so these are kind of 2 modern platform video games, so some of you may recognize these. So what makes that math useful in these games, and I'm going to tie this back to badges in a second. This is not a D&D 101 talk. But what makes those things useful, that math in those games,
Hey, Lucas,
yeah.
Could you adjust your mic real quick?
Sure. It hasn't moved, although I may have.
Maybe that's a little bit better. It seems to just fade out a little bit, but
Yeah,
maybe we'll keep an eye on it.
Maybe the internet connection as well.
Could be.
Yeah, well, let me know if it happens again. If it starts to fade, everybody wave their arms or something. I don't know that I'm getting 60 frames per second of you guys. It might be 5 frames, but I can see you every now and then. It's kind of stop motioning. So yeah, there are a couple things. There are lots of things I will say about that, the way that math is done and the way the players build characters that is very useful in games. One of them is that it's very easy, or it makes it much easier to scale difficulty and to balance teams. Because if you know what people are good and bad at, basic math, you know how much challenge you can throw their way. It's also much easier, when I say balanced teams, I mean if you have a multidisciplinary team of people that are good at, you know, different things, you can match them up based on their skills and abilities and how good they are at them. And so here's an example. This is just screenshots of things from D&D modules where it'll literally say, if you're adjusting the encounter, and then they have this determination here. It's a very weak party, strong party, very strong. All that is math. You take their level, you take what you take how many people there are, just a couple things, and you can immediately scale any encounter, right? And so the equivalent of this in, you know, education would be if people were doing a project or something like that. How nice would it be to be able to scale something to tailor it to a student, you know, to a student or to a group of students, you know, with reasonable precision. And so yeah, it even extends to like, here's like 2 creatures you might encounter, and I've highlighted here, there's a challenge rating, and so a kobold is an 8th challenge rating, and a manticore is 3. Those numbers don't mean anything to you, but it's to show that like, with some reasonable precision that you can estimate how difficult things should be. So, other reasons why that's useful in games, it lets players take ownership and build the character they want. So players take a lot of pride and they spend a lot of time planning out. If your students spend that much time planning out what courses and projects and what skills they want to learn, I think it would be probably a different system. There's a very clear path to progression and there's easy milestones for goal setting. So players always are very aware of what they want to accomplish and how they can get there. There's a clear path, with incremental steps. It's easily expandable. Basically, and this is how Wizards of the Coast, or I guess by extension Hasbro, the parent company, makes their money. They just add more stuff to do, and that stuff is you earn experience points based on what you do and how well you do, and you earn levels and you get better, and then things just scale and scale over time. And it's a pretty intuitive system. Everything is kind of explained very clearly on the surface, and I think it gives players a kind of a growth mindset too. Gamers in general are usually pretty open to failure, but in D&D, like there's this ebb and flow of like success and failure and doing like, oh, we did okay, or we really knocked that out of the park, but it's all okay no matter how you do, because you're always progressing towards some bigger goal. So. It was a long way to get there, but we made it. So how can we actually adapt something like this to badges? And this is something that we've started to do probably in the past year. We've done this in a couple different systems. But the idea, or at least the thing that we're playing with, is doing D&D, but in reverse. So you have tracking for individual skills. So the simple breakdown is the way that I explain D&D to you. Essentially, players have abilities, and those abilities enable them to perform skills, and those skills enable them to perform actions, right? Because it's all imaginary, right? You're not actually fighting dragons, right? None of us have the cardio to do that, if you've ever played with a table of D&D players. So, what I think we could do is do that in reverse, and it's what I would think of as maybe like the start of some kind of competency-based badging, where you're performing actions which lead to an increase in skill values that we are tracking, and those skill values contribute to ability scores or core competencies, right? And so it's kind of like D&D, but in reverse, because you're actually doing the things. And so the competencies and those big abilities are built by doing stuff, by gaining skill proficiency. And the way that we do that, and I want to talk about some, I have like some examples and some case studies, because again, this is something that we just really started to kind of play around with, so I can't point to like, completed projects or things that are like, this is, because a lot of this stuff is still very experimental and we're trying to work our way through it. But how we would do that is essentially to have a weighted point system and tags for everything, right? You could probably look at a piece of curriculum or a course or projects or a degree or certificate, and you could probably say, this thing relates to this. And when I say weighted, you decide how much or the degree to which it contributes to a skill, right? And that's just as precise as something can be when an expert is looking at it. There are ways that you can make those things more precise over time, right? You award badges, and so people are completing things, and they're essentially earning skill points. They can be awarded badges then, instead of doing individual things, for crossing thresholds, right? So like, let's just say you have 1,000 possible points. Well, if somebody crosses 50, then maybe they've earned a badge on their way to some end state, right? Or ideally, there's probably never an end state for this. This is why there's a nice thing. There's always more stuff to do, right? As long as it's tagged. You can also, if you have existing badges, they can be weighted and tagged along with any new content. And you can allow, it allows new content to be added, weighted, and reviewed, ideally by earners themselves. So these systems can be self-sustaining and kind of self-generating. That is the one concern with a system like this is, you mean I have to go through and tag all of my stuff and do all, and because it is a lot of work up front. But we're trying to figure out ways to let earners actually make these things kind of bottom up.
Hey Lucas, can you adjust your microphone?
Sure. We might just have to. The last time we just kind of waited a second and it got better. I think we got everything. Let's see.
I think we're good.
I think we're good. Thank you to whoever. I saw somebody waving there. I saw somebody flailing. That was good. It looked like the inflatable things at with car dealerships, so they do like the waving thing. That was good. That's good. That would be our emergency, in case of emergency, flail like inflatable guys. So I have a couple kind of case studies or things that we're working through to show you all, assuming you're still there.
We're still there.
Oh, cool. So yeah, because the video cuts out every now and then. Good. So there's a competency-based system that we're working on with a university partner. There's a little. Well, I was going to show you a little piece of the platform that we use, and then a way to visualize that stuff potentially. So the first thing is just a case study. I don't have anything that I can show you necessarily. It's something that's being built right now. But the early EDU Alliance at the University of Washington was brave enough to let us to experiment with some of this stuff with their content. And this is a system that we're working on now alongside some of the courses that they're doing for a certificate program. But essentially what we did is we looked at their content, and we had a room full of subject matter experts that were, that knew this content kind of in and out, and they determined that there were 5 core competencies that related to this content that we were looking at, these courses. And within those core competencies, we mapped out a bunch of skills, and they had their own little take on how those skills should be mapped out. They had their own little kind of breakdown and hierarchy. It ended up being dozens of individual skills, but they all mapped back to 5 core competencies, right? Or in D&D, we would call those abilities, right? And we essentially went through and we started the process of tagging different activities, tagging different content, and weighting them based on, when I say weighting, again, if you're actually doing something, you should get more points than if you're just reading something, right? So like it's that kind of thing, or maybe something is super difficult. And then we're starting to play around with how do we actually validate that stuff, and it's going to be some combination of instructors and peers and self-assessment for actually scoring the artifacts, right? So that's kind of a basic template of how that would be done. I'll show you the way that we do it for online courses is, or one of the ways that you can do it for online courses is this. And so this is just this is just a demo course that I threw up here for our from our platform. But you have students looking at a picture of bees. There, you want them to draw a picture of the beehive, right? And you would, so they can understand why it's shaped that way, what it looks like. You could grab one of these things. You would say, I want to add a competency to that, and you would just say, oh, that's entomology and maybe a bit of ecology. You would tweak the weightings of those things. And then when a student, you would determine how it was awarded, right? You would say, well, on a particular, for a particular course or something like that, or for a particular thing, we want that to be done on a click or on an actual, we could do page timers, you could do it, or if it's just assessed in some way, actually, right? You could have a teacher look at it, you could have a peer look at it, you could even have them do self-assessment if you trust them, which I think you should. But yeah, so that's a way that we do it, and a way that you can do it. And I think I think that a lot of online courses will probably go, or at least experiment with something like that at some point, because it's just it works pretty well. So, and then a way to display these things. So we've talked about how to plan it. We've talked about how to actually maybe implement it into a thing. And then a way to actually display it. And I'm not going to read a blog post to you. And I'll post this at the end. But there's a company down here in North Carolina called Participate, and we just wrote an interesting blog post for them or with them. And I wrote it with somebody named Carrie Lemoy. She's another badge person who she knows lots of stuff, and her company's called Open Works Group. And the idea is that, and you have to, I'll make sure Chris sends you the link so you don't have to scramble to write down the link. But the idea is that with the new badge, like I said, this is actually something that has been part of the badging, the open badges spec for a while. But everybody, those of you that have done badges before, they probably were static images, right? They were PNGs, and they don't have to be PNGs. There's another option in there where you can make the badge images SVGs, right? And so an SVG is a markup language, right? You can have the badges actually change over time based on a set of criteria, or be animated, right? And so the idea is that, and this is just a way to visually display them. You have to have a complicated, kind of a back end planned out, kind of like the stuff that we talked about, to actually make those changes take place. But imagine if a student earned a badge, and then they resubmitted better evidence later, and the badge visually changed, right? Or if they got better at something and they proved it, but they said, well, actually, I'm going to do this project instead of this one, and I'm going to add this one. And the badge would actually kind of dynamically visually change over time. And it would actually show, instead of an event that they did or a single artifact, their progression over time. So that's something that they're starting to explore now, and I think that's kind of interesting, but again, this is in the current, if you guys are using open badges, that's part of the current spec. You can make badges animated, you can make them dynamic. And so, ways that I think this could actually make badging better, and I don't, like I said, this is all new, and it's kind of experimental, so part of what we're doing is just talking to people, asking them what they think, how can we make it better, how could it, how could this work? But I think there's a couple things that I think will actually, I think it really could make a difference. I think it'll help us build more robust learner profiles and give us a more complete picture of who they actually are, right? Like, I have a biology degree. What does that mean? Like, there's like so many, there's so much stuff in biology. What is it like? Do I like trees or bugs? Am I an ecologist? The answer is entomology because it is the best. But yeah, but to be able to look at somebody's degree and actually like have a breakdown of what they really are good at and what they like. I think it'll help us make more adaptive environments based on their profiles. In the same way that we scale difficulty in D&D, I can look at a group, I can look at an individual, and I can do some simple math, and I can say, based on this is what I can throw at them in order to challenge them, right? Because that's the whole point. In D&D, you always want players to feel challenged. Or in any game, you always want them to feel challenged, right? And in education, it's kind of the same thing. That helps us do that. I think we'll be able to make smarter recommendations. If you have a pretty good learner profile based on all the things that they've done, it's an interest survey, right? It's what they like, but it's also some measure of what they're good at. We can make really good recommendations, right? Just like when you pop onto Amazon that says, hey, you bought this, you should buy this too. Same thing. It's very easy to set up exemplars or mentoring systems. So think about it, if you have skill profiles and you want students to be setting long-term goals about who they want to be, you can look at someone's profile and say, this person is in this job, and these are the skills and the abilities that they have. These are the proficiencies that they have. Here's some stuff you could do to get to that point. Or if it's a mentoring thing, you could even have them talk to that person, right? Dungeon Party Finder, that without context probably doesn't make any sense. In most online, or a lot of online MMOs, they have Dungeon Party Finders that do, they put people in multidisciplinary teams automatically, just based on scores, based on your class, your ability, your level, what you're good at. You basically say, I want to go fight this thing, and the system will say, cool, go meet up with these 6 people and do that. And it does it so you're kind of balanced, so you have a good balance of people. So that would be useful. And then finally, we lost one. RPG badging, I think, can be a bottom-up, user-generated kind of thing, and that's what I talked about earlier. That you can ideally, or should ideally, because these systems will probably take a lot of work, have the earners actually create and generate their own content, their own stuff, their own taggings, and have them help with validation. And when you do that, then it's less work for you. And you can do what we all do, slowly back out of the room while they're doing it, and then take credit for it later. And then, yeah, so that's it. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions and discussions. So I'll stop, I'll leave this up for a second. The things are great, that's my contact information. The second link is if you actually want to watch somebody play D&D. This is a great show. Here's the link to the D&D website, and then this is a link to the blog post, and I'll make sure Chris can get that to everybody.
Thank you so much, Lucas. You might be wondering, who that was on the other end. That is our next presenter. So basically, as soon as we're done here, I think we're set for 11:15. We've got time for a couple questions, then we'll switch over to David and keep the party going. So here's our first question.
Hi there. With regards to your example or question about somebody's a biologist, how do we know what they're interested in and what they're good at? Isn't that what a transcript provides? And I guess the general question is how much of this idea of rating somebody's abilities and skills is really already done, maybe imperfectly, but it's already done with existing GPA and academic awards and transcripts and things like that.
And you cut out for the audio cut out, but I heard it started with it's already done perfectly with GPA and academic awards and stuff.
Well, no, I would say it's done imperfectly.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, you guys disagree with that, so yeah, that's totally different. Yeah, it's a different conversation. Okay, good. Yeah.
But I mean, how? I guess how does the current existing system imperfectly meet some of the goals that you described in your presentation?
Oh, so how does the current system accomplish some of that now?
Yeah.
You mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think part of the point of badges originally was to fill in the gray areas, right? Like we already have formal structures that identify degrees and grades and badges or not badges, but like all the formalized stuff that we have, right? And badges were meant to be all the gray area. Because right now what a lot of people do is they fill in that gray area with extracurriculars. Like there isn't somebody that applies for college now that doesn't have a bulleted list of extracurricular activities. They're trying to tell a story of who they are and what they want to actually accomplish. And I think the current system, I think people have to fill in those gaps on their own now. And I would say that what we do pretty well at universities or at really K-12 too is we do, like there are plenty of instructional designers that map and plan all this stuff out. And like the kind of thing that I talked about, like the core competencies that map to skills, a lot of that stuff probably exists somewhere. It's how they make the content in the first place. It might be in someone's head, or it might be in a bulleted, I'm not defending how instructional designers or how we organize this stuff all the time, but like that information exists. We just don't use it beyond making the content. But I mean that's any course or any class I've ever taught, anything like, you map all that stuff out. You decide in kind of simple English what you want them to do. What are the steps? What are the verbs, basically? And then we just stop. Once the content is up there, then we're like, well, it's time to have a PowerPoint and shout things at them. But yeah, and I would say that one of the things that we don't do a very good job of is, and I know this isn't your question, but I don't think we don't let students have enough say in what they're actually submitting or contributing or learning. And like that was part of the point of badges too. Originally, it was meant to be like kind of a bottom-up thing, where it was like, it's so much work to have to create content and try to keep up with current trends and what people are working on and what's available and like providing all this stuff to students. So I like systems where the earners or the learners are actually contributing stuff, because then the educator can act like more of a facilitator. And I think the current system kind of does that, but it's not great.
Other questions?
My answer to the question that I thought you asked was much angrier. I was like, I don't know if that's true. Yeah. Tell me how GPA is perfect. Well, that's an interesting question.
Calculated 5 decimal points. It has to be perfect.
Yeah, we did it. It's 2 decimal places. It's how much more accuracy do you need?
All right.
I just wanted to clarify something you had said on an earlier slide. You talked about everything having a points and a weight system added to it. And I wondered if in that system you meant all badges had weight, or do you mean along with other assignments, participation, other things in the class, or sort of what was, and if I missed it, I apologize, but sort of like what was the overall context of that?
I'm going to have to do what we did before. Can you repeat your question? Because I got a low bandwidth message as soon as you started asking.
So back to your slide that talked about everything having points and a weight assigned to it.
Yeah.
What's the context of that? Are you talking about all badges having points and weight assigned to them, or along with other things in a class?
Yeah, no, so it's, and I shut my camera off to maybe help you guys on the bandwidth issue, so hopefully that, but I'm here. So the idea is that the badges themselves are not tagged or weighted or scored. They are the result of stuff being tagged. So you tag the content. So for example, if somebody was taking an online course and they read 3 pages of stuff, you might say, well, because they read 3 pages of stuff, I'm going to give them 1 point for each page on for these particular topic areas. After they've read those 3 pages, they participate in a discussion with their peers about it. You would weight that a little bit more, right? And if it was a good discussion, then it's up, well, maybe they get 2 or 3 points, right? And then you have them actually do a project, or play a game, or play a simulation, or give a speech, or whatever. So you're weighting the content, and you're weighting the stuff that they actually do, and then you just, you sort it basically. It gets put into kind of it gets sent to the appropriate skill or ability, and then the badges are rewarded based on people crossing a certain threshold. For a particular skill, if you've earned, once you've got 50 points, then you get your first little, so it's an increment along a scale, basically. If that makes sense. And I'm not saying that's the best way to do it, I'm saying that's the best way we've thought about doing it now, and it's probably the simplest way you can do it. I think stuff like this will get more interesting once we can start to have different kinds of evaluation, like system evaluation. You can have AI help with this stuff. There's lots of, but I think it'll get. Right now, we're kind of limited to like online classes are kind of the easiest way to do it. But I would love to do it like in person, or ideally, this is again what badges I think were intended. Capture all this crazy stuff that happens outside of the classroom and outside of schools.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So I'm a little bit critical of badges. I think in general,
Me too.
I think the idea in general of celebrating success is important. I think the aspect that hasn't sold me on badges yet is I'm not exactly sure how to communicate levels of success through, sort of applying badges, and they're kind of biased to be sort of positive, which, positivity is a good thing, generally speaking, but sometimes it creates like an alternate universe where you're getting badges for accomplishments and maybe, you shouldn't be or something like that. So I think in general the idea is a good one. I'm not sure where it's going, or if it's like a kind of a completely thought out concept yet. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, plenty. I would turn my camera on if it weren't for the bandwidth, so you can see how animated I will be when I talk about this. I completely agree. I think, for one thing, there's no reason you can't have negative badges. There's no reason you can't give someone badges for failing epically. I think that's awesome. If somebody doesn't create, this is something that we want to try to avoid in systems like this. And you're 100% correct. If you only reward success, then people will not do things like experiment. Like learning through experimentation and failure is awesome. So if somebody fails 5 times in a row, maybe that's a badge. So I 100% agree that that is the case. I also think that anytime we design any of these systems, and anytime I talk to people about this, I assume you guys are still there. You probably cut your camera off as well.
Yeah, for the same reason.
Sure. Okay. Cool. Then I feel like I'm talking just to Chris. There's just a picture of him. So
talk to me.
So I think we should also think about when people are earning a badge, they may have failed 5 times, or however many times before they actually earned the badge, right? So that badge hopefully signifies a goal that somebody set, and then maybe them failing 3 or 4 times, submitting and resubmitting until they've actually completed the goal. Then I think it's a different picture. And also I would say one thing that can help with that is that if you have ideally the students creating their own goals and setting their own standards, then it doesn't feel like a reward someone else gave you. It feels like just something you decided you wanted to do and you did it. I think never think of badges as rewards. They're kind of a crappy reward, right? It's not a, like, they're not, to me, they're not good for that. I think, always think of them as a way to explain content better, as a way to provide a goal-setting mechanic, as a way to provide feedback. When you do it that way, and then let them kind of fail along their journey, I think that's much better. But yeah, you are very correct that we shouldn't just be giving everybody a gentle pat on the head periodically. You should 100% let them fail.